Welcome to episode 127 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I'm honestly just way more excited that in space they cannot hear me cry.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and I'm ready to talk about Sigourney Weaver's neck and comparing it to the Xenomorph's neck.
Good God. So our guest today is going to kill you because she doesn't like when you talk about necks. No.
But I wasn't the one who talked about necks before. It wasn't me last time.
I'm cutting all this. Gemma Moore is back, everybody. We are excited to have you here, Gemma.
Welcome.
Hello.
So I'm gonna have you in a second tell our listeners a bit about yourself, but I don't know if you're aware of this. This was the film that I thought about doing as the first episode for this show. And obviously they live one out, and plus I was on a big They Live kick at the time. But it really came down to, for me, that this film needs a woman involved in the talk, and we didn't have guests back then, so I'm so glad we waited. But more than that, I honestly feel like Ripley just reminds me of the energy that you bring to the horror writing community.
And you have just made my entire year. You're on my Christmas card list now. Thank you.
Amazing. Postage will only be $45 to the state.
If only that were untrue.
But no, I'm so glad that you're the guest. That's what I wanted to say.
I mean, this is one of my favorite movies, I think, full stop. And it's interesting because researching this, I was watching the director's cut version. So I should caveat this entire episode by saying I'm referring to the director's cut, although I couldn't really see a huge difference between that and the cinema cut. But and as part of the thingy that I bought on Amazon, it had the featurettes at the end, mini documentaries and stuff, and they were talking about Giger's artwork, which was the basis for the xenomorph in this movie, and they got the idea from his book, The Necronomy, which was full of his artwork and stuff. So I thought the link was very cool, and how apt. It was called the Necronomicon. Sorry, his book is full of artwork and stuff, and we'll get to that because I've got notes. God damn it! But
excellent.
Yeah,
Somebody
I'm excited. I'm excited also because I've come to realize since I've kind of embraced horror as fully as I have over the last 5 to 10 years, that I think my favorite genre or subgenre of horror, if I had to choose one, would be sci-fi or space horror. I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, is it body horror? Is it slasher? It's definitely not slasher. Is it kind of crime, serial killer stuff? But no, it's gonna be sci-fi horror, and it fits into that whole category of Event Horizon, The Thing, all the Blob movies, The Fly. You know, all those kind of films that just blow your mind in terms of the scientific possibilities, which I just the combination of science fiction and horror works so well for me. And I think this film basically epitomizes it. And I think particularly in light of the fact that Ridley Scott was obsessed with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he basically kind of openly admitted several times in a row that he wanted to recreate that in space. And that's essentially what this film is. So it's like the perfect love child of horror and sci-fi. So I'm excited.
That's amazing. So let's back up for a minute and let you tell our listeners a bit about yourself, your new book, the short film, and whatever else you got going on.
So for anyone that hasn't heard me on a couple of the other episodes of this show, my name is Gemma Moore, and I am a horror author, illustrator, I guess I can call myself that now, and a podcaster, sort of part-time podcaster, voice actor, depending on what extra time I have. I have a Bram Stoker nomination, and I am also starting to branch out into other things like video games and a short film. And I'd like to do a bit more film work as well, because film is kind of my passion. And my newest book has just come out last week. I sort of slightly buggered up the release because I pressurized my publisher into announcing the paperback before the pre-orders were live, because I was so impatient to get it out. But they've been really good with me. So my newest book is out from a wonderful little indie publisher called Cemetery Gates Media, and it's called Six Rooms, and it is a haunted house book. But it's kind of a modern haunted house book with a twist. And it allowed me to indulge in my love and obsession with architecture and building design and historic houses and antiques and collectibles and things like that. And also, I'd not really written properly about ghosts before, beyond like the odd short story. So, and it's pretty violent too. I think I was working through some pandemic related issues and anger. So yes, that's out now on Amazon at the moment for Kindle and paperback, and I believe there are plans to make it more widely available on other platforms, and probably a special edition next year in which I might provide some more illustrations. We might do like a hardback version of it, depending on how well things go.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so the short film that you mentioned, I have written, or co-written, I should say. A very nice young Dutch man approached me at the beginning of the pandemic and asked me my opinion on a story he was turning into a screenplay, his first sort of screenplay. He wanted to get into the movies, and he asked me my opinion on some of the themes and the issues, and we ended up kind of co-writing the script together. And it's a short film, a short horror film, a historic horror film called A Basement. And it is about a young lady who is a professional photographer, a working photographer. And her job is to photograph a particularly difficult subject matter. I won't spoil it any more than that. So the film is still in post-production. We're currently about 60% of the way through our fundraising target to help us raise money to just make the rest of it extra special. So hiring a composer and getting the right sound and some visual effects and stuff. So if anybody wants to help us with that, they can just type A Basement movie into Google and my name will pop up alongside Jeroen van Dubenjoid, who is the kind of person who helmed the entire project. But yeah, it's very cool. It looks beautiful, and it's got lots of big, stiff crinoline dresses and horses and carriages and all sorts of cool, spooky old things. So that was great fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
How did you feel collaborating with somebody versus writing alone? Like, was it a totally different experience for you, or like?
It wasn't a new experience for me. I've collaborated quite a few times with a few people over the past couple of years. I co-wrote the Calling Darkness podcast, season 1 with S.H. Cooper. That was a learning curve. Learning to collaborate is a skill set. Mm-hmm. Letting go of some ideas and knowing when to stick to your guns and push other ideas, and accommodating other people's personalities and all sorts of things. So I was very aware that this was Jeroen's movie and that he was coming to me for advice. I just wanted to help. So I very much just let him lead, but I gave quite strong advice in certain areas. So the protagonist in his mind originally was going to be male, and I pushed and advocated for it to be female and just other things like that. So we worked really well together, and I have a feeling we'll probably end up working together on another project. I've got some ideas that I'd like to go to him with. So once we get this one in the bag and see how well it does, fingers crossed there'll be a few more adventures in the future.
Love it. All right. So you've already kind of answered the next question, which, is always, why'd you pick this film? And you sort of hit it, but do you have anything that you really want to point out of why Alien is so important to you?
It's so fucking awesome. And I think actually, like what you said about Ripley is one of my favorite characters. I think in any film, full stop, because she's such a believable character to me. a strange mix of incredibly competent but also terrified in this film. Her character becomes a lot more two-dimensional, I feel, as the movies progress, the franchise progresses, but then so do the films and the story.
Right.
In this film, I just very much liked how Sigourney Weaver portrayed Ripley. And interestingly, again, watching the documentary just before this show, like, this was her first feature movie. She'd been in kind of the stage beforehand. She'd been in your version of the West End is Broadway, I think. And this was her first time on set. And she was convinced, and the rest of the cast were also convinced, that she wasn't doing a very good job. So she was pushed an awful lot by Ridley Scott and by some of her fellow cast members as well, and some really cool scenes. And actually, what I thought she brought to the role was a level of believability that I don't think I'd seen before. I think maybe with The Thing, which is the other film that I would compare this to, Kurt Russell's kind of performance in that was very similar to this. It's like just doing what you need to do to survive, getting shit done in a very low-key way. It wasn't as extra as in Aliens, where you've got the kind of gung-ho military, like Bill Paxton with his gum, and do you know what I mean? It's like that was a million miles away as a movie for me, and I love that film as well, and I've got a very special place in my heart for it. But this was all about realism and grit, and this is a true horror film, and I feel like a horror protagonist should be a normal person, or a relatively normal person, in an extraordinary position, and that's exactly what this film is. So yeah, it's all about Ripley for me.
I love it. So
I love
Don,
her.
what does Alien mean to you?
All right. So first, that the scene where you're able to, you know, when Ripley like pulls her hair up and you can fully see her neck.
I'm leaving.
So like for the listeners,
I'm sorry,
at
I have to
home,
put some inside base.
for the listeners at home, the reason that Don keeps talking about necks is because at some point, I can't remember which one of you it was, you had Josh Rubin on the show.
Yeah,
and you didn't invite me, which I'm still extremely sore and tender about. And not only did you not invite me, but then you spent probably about 20 minutes in great detail describing Michelle Pfeiffer's neck in Batman Returns. And I was listening to it while I was cooking or whatever, and I was just chuckling at the lascivious levels of detail that were being applied to the scene where she, with her neck, basically, and it just made me laugh so much. And I ribbed you both mercilessly about it.
And I was innocent. I was the innocent in that conversation.
I'm going to go back and listen and prove that's not true.
Okay. Well,
go back and listen.
If anything, I was the most innocent then. So anyway.
So really, what does Alien mean to you?
All right, here's where I am when I saw the movie. I think I saw Aliens before I saw Alien because it had come out, and my parents were not shy, or I should say my dad was not shy about, you know, having me watch horror movies. But with this movie, it was at a time when I was just in love with space. Any movie that you're dealing with space, any TV show, like I was watching, I was filming it. I wanted to be an astronaut. And these movies didn't change that perspective, you know, making me think that, oh my gosh, there's going to be an alien, that, you know, there's going to be some crazy xenomorph that is out there. But as an adult watching this film, all the fear of the xenomorph is nothing in comparison to the anger that you have with everyone on the crew who's not doing what they should be doing, or at least putting other people in danger. And especially watching it in with everything that's gone over the last couple, or taken place in the last couple of years. For me, this movie is a great sci-fi movie, a great horror film, a great action movie as well, because unlike the sequel Aliens that is, you know, heavily action driven, this one is driven by the interactions between people. It's driven by the conflict that arises from, you know, this unknown being that arrives and they don't exactly know what to do with it. But it's also just the way the story's told, where they're not trying to tell you everything about the xenomorph, the alien. You know, they don't even have a name for it, you know, which is great because it's not something where they just go ahead and give it a name and say, oh, it's a face sucker, or it's, you know, or this is exactly what type of species this is. They know nothing about it. So you get to see how they figure out or how they're trying to determine what's going on with this thing, even when they try to do a vivisection on it and realize like, oh my gosh, this thing shoots out acid. It must be some way of protecting itself. And then you're seeing the concern that they have over what to do. And which again, watching it as an adult, you pick up more on those things than when you watch it as a kid, because as a kid, it becomes one of those things of, well, I'm concerned with the alien. I'm concerned with what's going to happen in this show or in this movie, as opposed to I'm concerned of what I would do in this situation as an adult and dealing with people that aren't necessarily picking up on all the dangers and possibly putting my life at risk.
Yeah, and it's a human story as well, and I think that's again, I keep comparing it to The Thing because the setup is exactly the same. It's isolation horror. It's a very remote location. There's not for the large part of the film that's on the Nostromo, there's no escape, and it's the same in the wastes of Antarctica. You can't really just run outside and get away from the thing. So it's confined, claustrophobic, human-based horror, where people get picked off one by one. And that's because of their own poor decision-making process or inability to work together. That kind of iconic line from The Thing, nobody trusts anyone anymore. You sort of see that at play here as well. Like they don't respect Ripley's word or opinion right at the very beginning when, jumping ahead to they've investigated the alien planet. They found these kind of peculiar egg sacs in the hold of the alien ship and the craft. John Hurt's been infected and has a face hugger literally on his face, and Ripley is quite sensibly saying, "No, I don't really want to let you on this ship because you might contaminate us all." And that is the decision point. And she's absolutely 100% right. And the rest of them are like, "Nah, fuck you." And it's, in hindsight, I suppose, they would have thought about it more. But at the time, they're just fixed on the human story, which is saving the life of one of the crew, rather than seeing the bigger picture, which I think is only a mindset you get into, as we've seen in current situations in the pandemic, when something of a kind of infection level event happens and has been underway for some time, or when you've had previous experience of it. I think we as humans are just like, no, we can't think about the worst case scenario. We never can. So we just focus on what's happening in front of us at that moment in time. And that's why it works so well for horror as well, I think, because it's immediate, isn't it? Your immediate actions then have longer term consequences.
Well, I was going to say, even with that, you've got to compound that, not just a human element, but this, I guess, this commercial enterprise element, where this is a private business or private corporation that has sent them out into space for whatever their mission is, has come up with a protocol. But then you see how some are being driven by, look, I'm going to get my money. Like, I understand what's going on here. And so there is that idea of getting your share of whatever the profits are, getting your share or your bonus to go along with this. So you've got so many things going on, besides the face hugger on Kane, where, some of them aren't concerned with that. It's concern of, I want to survive so I can make my money. But then the business end of it, to skip ahead, the business side of it is they were intentionally sent out there to go find this.
Yeah. Under false pretenses as well. And that's so it's the idea. What I loved about that subplot line as well is you have Ash's character, who's kind of like the second baddie. And there's a moment where Sigourney Weaver realizes that they've been double-crossed, if you want a reductionist way of putting it, and their chances of survival are quite low, and they've all been sent as like sacrificial lambs to go gather this kind of alien DNA or whatever. And Ash is the bad guy. He's the second bad guy in the house. So going back to that whole Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing, Ridley Scott has talked a lot about how he wanted the Nostromo, the spaceship, to basically be like a house in the middle of nowhere where one by one people get picked off. And often in those kind of horror movies, there isn't just one bad guy. There can sometimes be like a red herring or a double, you know what I mean? Like a double evil presence.
Right.
And then, so you think you know where you are. You think you know the xenomorph is the baddie. He's kind of hiding in the air ducts, whatever. But then all of a sudden you've got this suddenly murderous android who will do whatever it takes to fulfill the objective. So then you have another kind of layer of fear and horror, because all along he's been working at cross purposes to them. So their chances of survival were always nil, you know?
Right.
And that's it's quite scary to think about the idea that you were never going to survive something because somebody else made a decision that a commercial gain or a commercial directive was more important than human life. But in his defense, he's a robot, so it's like well, an android. But do you know what I mean? It's like you can apply an awful lot of what's going on in Alien from 1979 to what's happening around us in the world today in very, very many ways. And it's quite disturbing to watch in light of recent events, I think. But then I also think that about most films I'm watching at the moment. It's a layer of subtext that never existed before the pandemic. So maybe we're all just traumatized. And
well, I think that's a big part of it, but I also don't think that makes it incorrect.
No.
One of the big things for me, like you're kind of hitting it, but when I was a kid, like probably from the age of 7 on, for like, I don't know how long, slashers were my thing, right? Like I went to the video store and just watched any slasher I could get a hold of. And I remember the first time that I saw this film, I was like, you can do a slasher that way? And I didn't know anything about the connection with Texas Chainsaw and all that stuff. It was literally just, holy shit, it's another way to do a slasher. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, I don't think that I said it in those terms, of course, but I think like I was telling my dad, like, oh, it's like Jason, except Jason's the alien, like, and I just remember my dad staring at me like, what is wrong with you? Why do you watch this shit? But yeah, it was like this huge moment that I didn't know was a huge moment, but it has definitely affected how I write, how I think. Like I still tend to plug everything into slashers, even though slashers are no longer my choice. You mentioned your category of choice, and mine is definitely like supernatural, like ghosts, demons, any of that kind of stuff. That's where I'm constantly drawn. But I feel like I still do the same thing with it. Like I still think in terms of this thing is attacking us and picking us off one by one.
Yeah, because that's the classic horror format. Because it's not, that's the scariest thing you can think of, right? Is that the unseen evil is killing everyone around you, and you're next. You're next is like the underpinning horror thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And survival against the odds. But also for me, the thing that I've watched, I must have seen this film maybe 25, 30 times now, if not more. And it never doesn't feel claustrophobic. And I think the idea of kind of a small enclosed space with a number of people, again, Event Horizon also springs to mind for this. Spaceships are perfect for horror because they're floating murder houses, basically. Yeah. It's like, you're in a small confined space or a large confined space. Either way, you're in a confined space and you can't really get off of it because what's out there is space and you'll die. So, it's like being on a desert island or locked in a basement or in a haunted house or a single setting, basically. Although Alien does cover multiple settings, the majority of it is a single setting environment. And the sense of claustrophobia is insane in this film. And again, watching the documentaries and how it was made, it was the entire set of the Nostromo was constructed down at Shepperton Studios, which is just outside of London. And they were saying in this documentary I watched, it's kind of a quite, at the time, it was quite a run-down set studio. But what they did was they recreated the entirety of the Nostromo But they didn't do each individual room as a kind of individual set. They made every single room connect to the next one. So the actors would kind of go in onto the set, and the only way to get out of the set was to kind of walk around the entirety of the Nostromo, like walk through the corridors, walk through the mess hall, walk through, And so they would be in there. They were saying basically once you were in there, you were in there. You didn't come out for hours. And I think the other thing that kind of reinforces to me what I love about this film and what I love about a lot of films is the practical effects element, which I'm a stickler for. So the building of the sets, the model making. So for me, like in the opening scene where you see Nostromo kind of floating off into space, and there's something kind of really sparse and utilitarian about it, coupled with the kind of amazing design on the title cards and stuff, and where the font's placed and all this stuff that they've thought about so carefully. But you've got this instant scene setting with the spaceship. And because it's modeled, it's an actual model, like there's something about the way it looks. It is, aside from the kind of gorgeous like ship design, it's like this, I don't know, it's like this high resolution kind of, there's something about a model that looks different to computer graphics. And I don't know how, because it shouldn't in theory, but there's something about the lighting, which I think is much more stark and realistic to me. And the way the ship was designed. And I think that carries through into the actual xenomorph itself, which just in this film was played by an actor. And in the other films was kind of puppetry and computer graphics. So I'm not against computer graphics at all. I'm a huge, CG fan, but my first love was always practical effects, and Ray Harryhausen movies and modeling and Jim Henson and puppetry kind of fits in with that. But I just love a horror movie with practical shit in it, because it just feels more real to me and more horrific. And even in scenes like where Ash is kind of unveiled as an android, and they've beaten the shit out of him and they've taken his head off, and then they're trying to reassemble him so that he can tell them, what his actual objectives were. And his head's, or Ian Holm's head's, kind of sat on a table surrounded by like tapioca or caviar or noodles or milk or whatever practical shit it is that they've made to make him look squishy and androidy. And it works so well, and I love that. It's just it works so well for me. I've realized in my notes here, I'm scanning through my notes, I always note like my initial reactions to things as I see them again with a notebook, because you think differently when you're going to write something down as to when you're just watching. And I made, I was looking at the ship design of Nostromo on the inside, with all the kind of, particularly in like the padded cryo chamber bit where they all wake up out of sleep. And it really reminded me of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Really?
Kind of the Gene Wilder movie. The interiors of the Nostromo are quite a lot like some of the interiors in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. In my head, it's like a real similar weird and wacky design. And that led me down a completely irrelevant rabbit hole as to how the movie Snowpiercer is apparently a sequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which exists as a fan theory and is really, really fascinating and quite credible when you look into it. But the idea that everything has been built and the actors interact with things practically, whether it's the blood and the gore, the alien, the set, I think affected their performances as well, to get a lot more out of them in terms of that claustrophobia, if we're going to bring it back to what I was actually talking about. The idea of claustrophobic horror, I know from watching their interviews that they were intensely, they suffered intensely from feelings of claustrophobia from the set, from the fact they couldn't get off the damn set because it was so huge and interconnected, from the way that Ridley Scott directed this film, and also from their spacesuits and things like that, which weren't designed with any ventilation in at all. So cast members were like constantly passing out from the heat and from the lack of oxygen in the suit, and they were just rebreathing their own carbon dioxide all the time, which wasn't an issue for Ridley Scott until there's a scene where he had to use his own children in spacesuits because they use models. a little bit like the Lord of the Rings, they wanted to use a perspective trick to make the set look bigger than it was. So he put his own kids in these spacesuits to make the spaceship behind them look bigger. And they passed out. So then he decided they were going to put oxygen into the spacesuit. So there's so much about this film practically, which adds to the overall effect and the magic and the claustrophobia. And also, I think translates to a cinema experience. If you think about going to the cinema, you're surrounded by people, which now makes us feel a bit icky, again, in light of the pandemic. But you've got not much space in there, and it's dark and enclosed, and it's sort of mirrored in what you're seeing on the screen. And I love that. I think it's so effective. And I think I feel like I really need to go and write something claustrophobic now, desperately. It's so effective. It scares me, like the idea of being trapped in one single space with an unknown entity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel that way with a single mouse, but no. No, you hit on a lot of stuff, but I had just learned about the children being involved in filming, and I thought that was such a cool way to do it. Like, I don't think in these terms, so I never think about that kind of stuff. But like once they said it, I was like, wow, that's an amazing way to do a perspective shot. I love that. So
well,
I'm glad you brought that up.
They did a lot with the Lord of the Rings to make the hobbits look smaller than they were. They did sort of reverse perspective stuff where they would have other actors stand closer to the camera, I think, or depth of field manipulation, and lots of simple practical tricks to create an impression of size or the opposite. And I think it's a level of ingenuity that sometimes perhaps having access to a computer program removes from people. Maybe it's cheaper to just replicate it in graphics. I don't know. I like a practical effect. I feel like more has gone into it, which isn't to discredit graphic designers or 3D artists or anything at all. But I think from the director's point of view and the producers and everybody involved on set, it just feels like more perhaps goes into it when it's practically done. And I don't know if that's true or not, but.
Well, and I would say, I mean, this is like our 127th episode or something. And having done all these films and looking back, the ones that use practical effects hold up better. They look better. They're still, this is 79, right? And it looks awesome. Yeah, or you have
awesome.
Like The Thing. Like they look great still, So
the only thing I think, the only exception to my rule with me not liking CG as much is Jurassic Park, because the animation in Jurassic Park is still mind-blowingly good.
It is.
And just takes my breath away. And that's like 95, 94 when...
it might have been 93. I think it was earlier.
Something like that.
But no, those were real dinosaurs. I don't know what you're talking about, Gemma. That was not...
Yeah. But look at other movies from that period where they used effects. So I'm thinking of... was it Kevin Bacon? Was there an Invisible Man movie of some description?
Hollow Man.
Hollow Man. There we go. So you compare, and that can't have been too many years between them. And you compare the quality of animation between those films, like just staggeringly incredible computer graphics in Jurassic Park, which is also a horror movie. And if no one's come on to do that, then I'm coming on next to do that.
It's already been done.
Oh no, damn it.
The irony of this is so fantastic because Thomas is so mad that he didn't get to do Alien, but he did Jurassic Park.
Did he?
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
Oh well.
But no, I think your points about the practical effects are spot on. And especially what you're saying, James, as far as the way that these films are able to age is so much better than if you had CGI or you had, some type of animation to actually to drive the xenomorph, because that was one of the things I paid attention to, or I try to pay attention to with any film that has aged. And especially when I was rewatching this film, I was looking for those scenes where, all right, something is not going to look right or something's going to look odd. Like the only thing to me that I can recall that looked odd is the final scene where the xenomorph is shot out, spoiler alert, where it's shot out of the shuttle and it's dangling there, and then, it gets blasted with the booster rockets, right?
Yeah.
It just looks like somebody threw a toy out, into space, but then you kind of question like, well, what is the xenomorph supposed to do? It's out in space. How is it really going to? Is it really going to be struggling for air and breath and anything like that? It's
makes
cold.
me. That scene always makes me chuckle as well, because when she finally, because she blasts him out of the airlock, and then he kind of hangs on to an engine, doesn't he, and tries to climb up, and then she does something to blast him out again, and it makes me chuckle because in the other scene where something gets blasted out of the airlock, it's John Hurt's corpse.
Right.
And it's so fast. It's like, it's just done with no ceremony whatsoever. And I guess that's space, but it always reminds me of that the alien has a slightly more dignified like descent into space than poor John Hurt, who basically gets fired out of a body cannon. But
I hadn't thought of that. That's fantastic.
Like the speed of that scene is like.
Well, they didn't have any time to waste with him. And we're kind of like, all right, you guys said your goodbyes to him.
Bye. But that was obviously, again, that was recreated with models, and it must have been the constraints of filming. So there are a few things that that you can see. Again, with Ash and the android scene where they kind of switch not that smoothly between the prosthetic head and his actual head.
Right.
But I don't mind that shit. Like I like the little flaws and things synonymous with time. Like I always use Ray Harryhausen movies as an example, and my favorite is Jason and the Argonauts. And like it hasn't aged terribly well, except it really has. Like the classic scene of the Hydra's teeth that are sewn into the soil, and they pop up as skeleton warriors. And there's ranks of kind of skeleton dudes with swords and shields, and they advance on Jason and the crew of the Argo, and they have this big kind of fisty fight, sword fight. And on the one hand, it looks so dated. The acting is very dated. The film is very grainy and color rich. It's that Technicolor look. But the fucking models look amazing, and like this was like 1960 something. So I love it. Those films can never really age for me. I think when you see something and it sticks in your mind, it doesn't matter how many years pass. Things can never really truly date in that fashion, and I think this is one of those films.
Yeah, because even to marvel at the xenomorph, right? I like the fact that this film, and again, seeing it as a kid, seeing it as a teenager, seeing it as a young adult in my 20s, and then seeing it as I guess a grumpy old man. I watched, and I actually fell back in love with this style of shooting because they give you so little of the xenomorph. I mean, so little in more ways than one, when he first burst out of the chest of John Hurt. But so little of the xenomorph where you're kind of questioning, like, how big is this thing? Because this is there are small corridors within this ship. How big is this thing? How dangerous is it? I've already seen that one part of its body, or at least the larva stage or the infant stage of it, has this acid to protect it. So there were points where I was just questioning, even though I knew what the xenomorph looked like, I was questioning how the xenomorph was going to look. And
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, you get those glimpses where you see the teeth and you see the saliva, you see all this stuff going on, but at least from the version I was watching, you still have this moment where you kind of question, like, oh, am I going to get to see the full thing here? Am I going to get to see what all these people are screaming about or seeing, or, especially with Yaphet Kotto's character, am I going to see at one point what everybody else sees?
And you don't even meet the kind of grown up, I guess, xenomorph until like an hour and 10 or something into the film. Right. So like before that, there's all the different stages. There's the egg, there's the face hugger, the kind of larval chest burster stage. There's like 3 different larval stages before you get the fully grown thing. And I think for me, when you don't see something, it's another kind of classic rule of horror, isn't it? What you don't see, your brain kind of makes the rest. Right. And it normally goes down the worst possible route. And if you look at things like Halloween, you don't really see the protagonist that much unless he's standing in the distance or behind a bush or he has his mask on, or, any classic horror movie. Mm-hmm. You don't really see the baddie that much to begin with. Maybe not so much with Freddy Krueger, but you know what I mean? Like it's what you don't see that scares you. And also, I think this is a really good juncture to talk about the actor that played the xenomorph, because again, in the other films, it's either puppets or computer kind of animation, and it's not a performer playing the xenomorph. But the whole joy of that for me is that this is a kind of humanoid alien in a way. In many ways, it has a torso, it has legs, so it should move a bit like a human. And so to have a human performer. I don't quite know the correct pronunciation, but I think it's Bolaji Badejo or Badejo. You know, he was a 6'10" Nigerian guy with legs longer than me, and he was very slim and very angular. And the way he portrayed that was so much more terrifying than I think in subsequent films, because it looks like it could be human or was human at some point. You know, yeah, and that fear factor is ramped up by the little glimpses you see of, like you said, what does this thing actually look like? I can see maybe a jaw, or I can see the kind of penis head, or like I can see the claw or the tail, but you don't ever see the complete thing until the very, very end. And it's masterful, I think. And that's how it should be.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been one of the main strengths of this to me. And I was watching it this time, and I was really thinking, if you didn't know, like, you know, we've had 42 years or whatever, so we all know what it looks like. But like, what must it have been like in 79? There's no way to know what it looks like. And you're literally getting this evolution, like you were talking about, the different larva stages, and then, you know, until you get to the big one, right? Mm-hmm. But before it's revealed, having no idea what it is, like, I would think you'd think it's like a giant, like the little chest burster guy, or like that sort of thing. And instead, what you get is so much crazier and so cool, and almost like armored and insect-like and all these different things. And I would love to know what that felt like to get that reveal when you don't know what it is.
So one of the things that fascinates me the most about this is how they used Geiger's artwork for the xenomorph. And so they were talking, the producers in particular talked in various documentaries that I watched about finding Geiger's book, the Necronomicon book, which is a book full of illustrations. And the biggest conundrum the producers, I think, had for this movie, one of them, I think, openly stated when I think Dan O'Bannon was talking about when he was writing the screenplay, he didn't really care about the human characters at all. Like, for him, the big concern was getting the alien right, like how it should look, how it should act, that it was realistic. And the crew members were almost secondary in that, and they didn't really get written in very well at all. But so from a production point of view and from Ridley Scott's point of view, they knew that the most important thing was getting the alien right. And then one of the producers found this book, the Necronomicon book, and took it to Ridley Scott, and they showed him an illustration of a xenomorph. And it's basically almost exactly as it is in the film. It's got the long black kind of aubergine head or eggplant head, and the human torso and the humanoid arms. But then it sort of goes off into a weird tail with slight kind of bony substructures and stuff. So it's almost identical to how it is in the movie. And Ridley Scott looked at it, he went, yeah, that's it. I want that. But then the producers were trying to basically talk him out of it and saying, well, perhaps we should adapt it to this and that. And he just stuck to his guns the whole way. And he went, I don't care. I just want that. I want you to recreate that. So then they tried to talk to Geiger, and Geiger was kind of famously afraid of flying anywhere. So Ridley Scott flew over to his studio, and I think he's German. And they had the same conversation. He pointed to this illustration in his book and he went, I want that. And Geiger was like, well, maybe I should do this. And he was like, nope, I'm sticking to my guns. Make me that. That is the xenomorph. And he stuck to it. And that was the vision for this alien. And then he kind of said, right, you have creative license to come up with the face hugger and the chest burster and all the rest of it. And also he was brought on board to do most of the kind of visuals for the alien craft, anything alien related. But then he brought on two other very kind of respected artists for the kind of Nostromo design and other stuff. But it's just interesting how he saw Ridley Scott. It was very visual as well. So the other thing he did before making this film was he took himself off for 3.5 weeks or something, and he storyboarded every single scene in this movie. And he said as a result of doing that, he took it back to the producers and he doubled his budget, basically doubled it from like 4 million to 8 million, or 4.2 to 8.4 million dollars or something like that, just through the power of storyboarding. So everything for him was vision. I guess that's what they mean by a visionary director. Like, he had everything in his head mapped out that he wanted, like from a photography point of view, from a sound point of view, from an aesthetics point of view, from a creature design. He had all of it fixed firmly in his mind. I have a feeling that that's why it's one of the most enduringly scary representations of an alien on screen, because he saw and recognized the kind of horror in Giger's work, and he stuck to his guns. And I think, again, a lot of the studio execs involved were like, we don't want this guy's artwork to be part of this film. It's gross. Look at it. It's really repugnant. And they were like, no, but that's the whole point. It's going to scare people. It needs to be, because it's kind of weird and fluid and organic and sexy and like, you know, it's quite sexual. There's a lot of sexuality about Alien as well, which doesn't get picked up on so much, but particularly when the other female, Lambert's character dies, like her character dies in a much sexier way than the men's character does. You know, the alien tail kind of snakes around her thighs and up her back and stuff. And the subtext is like really rich and strong. So there's a real full-on sexuality to the xenomorph as well, which I think it is something that was very deliberate, and I think Scott picked up on and wanted to explore. I'm just rambling now. The old-fashioned's gone. But
right, because even when you get into the third movie, which I haven't seen in forever, but I remember that the xenomorph from Aliens, but the xenomorph from Aliens, in between that film and Alien 3, had apparently impregnated Ripley. So there is that connection, as well as, you know, if you're talking about using a human as a host, I mean, you got to look at that as well with Kane.
Well, it's like, it's even on a basic level. It's like, look at the design of the xenomorph. Mm-hmm. Like, its entire head is a penis. And like, when the chest burster comes out, your first thought is little bloody penis. Like, it just is. Like, it just looks like it's really phallic. And the face hugger, like when it's peeled off and they're dissecting it, the kind of the soft innards of it looks like, it's, you know, they look like lady parts. It's just really obvious that there is a level of like exploring that in the creature design. And I don't know whether that adds to the horror at all. It certainly adds to a level of body horror, which is another part of this film. Is like the beyond the kind of slasher element of people getting picked off one by one. There's some real body horror going on here. Again, mostly with Ash and like his body being kind of deconstructed and stuff. But I actually almost cringe more at the scenes with the face hugger than I do with the later scenes where the xenomorph is kind of attacking the crew. Because like you said, you don't see much of that. You see a lot of that off camera. You just see like a shot here and there, or some blood, or the cat hissing. But with the face hugger, you see that fucker like, tighten its like grip around John Hurt's neck. Like that, I always remember that. Like when they get him on the table, they cut the helmet off, and the face hugger's wrapped around his face, and it just, the tail wraps around Kane's neck and just very slowly and insidiously tightens. And that little detail is just gorgeous and so creepy. It's so creepy. I love it.
It would have been worse if Kane had said harder.
Yeah. I like it. No, shut up, Don.
You just had to bring it back to next, didn't you? No,
Gemma started it.
I did. It's my fault. It's your fault, actually. It's not my fault. There's something about this show and Nex. Is that why you've called it the Necronomicon?
Gotta change the spelling now.
I'm so gonna go away and Photoshop that.
I'm gonna go buy the domain now before somebody else does. I don't have any idea where I was going with this.
No, I've totally taken myself off track now.
No, I didn't notice the neck thing. I didn't notice the tail around the neck tightening until this viewing. And when you say it's a great detail, like it literally like personifies this thing. Like it makes it more evil, and it makes it insidiously trying to kill something, and it like
it's a conscious thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's not a reflex, it's a conscious decision to tighten its grip on its host.
Like, that is such a small way to add so much character to this thing that otherwise wouldn't have any.
Yeah.
And really fast, just to go back to, you were talking about storyboarding and stuff. I was thinking about the fact that on paper, this may not have been a great film. Like, I could see why they doubled the budget and why they poured everything in, because so much of this is about the isolation, as you've said. It's about the setting. It's about all the visual stuff. It's about like the creature you can kind of see in parts. And so very much of this is visual. And I don't think just having the pages to tell me about the characters, I would be like, this doesn't sound great. Mm-hmm.
I think
that's fascinating.
That's part of the magic of this movie. And I think, like a lot of other movies that start with a relatively small, unknown cast, crew, director, budget, presence, whatever you want to call it. These kind of, I think I kind of liken it to a bit like indie publishing or pirate radio, or that kind of level of creativity that's slightly untethered. And, the production, the people involved in producing this movie were really open about the fact that they took this screenplay or concept or whatever to multiple kind of A-list directors, and nobody wanted to touch it with a barge pole because they didn't want to make a stupid monster movie. Like, it was seen as a B movie, a monster feature, creature feature, and nobody wanted to make that. So they came across Ridley Scott because he had made a movie called The Duelists, but before that he'd only made commercials in the UK, and so he was quite unproven and unknown. And I don't know whether there's something about that adds a rawness to a movie where you, for the first time ever, you have, the ability to run with that creativity. You have a budget. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's your first shot at something like this, and you need to make it good. And that's what happened here, is that it went from the little film that was about an alien or a monster in space to this fucking claustrophobic conceptual nightmare horror movie. And I don't think I can't imagine film lexicon without it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's such an iconic piece of work. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody knows it, everybody has seen it, everybody knows the chestburster scene. They know what it's about. It's like it's a cultural thing now, right? Like, but it could have very easily just been a shitty monster movie that wasn't done very well.
Right.
And I think it's that force of vision. And by all accounts, he wasn't particularly nice to a lot of the people involved in the film. And he'd get very frustrated and angry and shout a lot. And I think he made Sigourney Weaver cry quite a few times and was a bit mean to her. But because he cared about, not that it's an excuse, but he cared about this film so much, it really comes through, that force of vision.
The vision and the visuals themselves. I think when you're talking about space movies, monsters, all this other stuff that's going on, whether you're talking about creature features within the horror genre, especially space ones, or whether it was on television or on film, they always, at least the ones I'm thinking about, they weren't intimidating. They weren't scary. It was almost one of those things of, if you were to see this in real life, you wouldn't run away from it. Whereas with this film, just the very thought of this and the glimpses that you get is enough. And I think that's part of the creativity, the genius in the film and the filmmaking, is by driving the tension with all those different things like that you already mentioned, as far as the claustrophobia, the detail with the sets themselves. And, even the direction from Ridley Scott himself, like getting people to be uncomfortable to where they're so uncomfortable on the screen that as an audience member, you're uncomfortable as well.
Yeah. I think actually one of the key moments for me that brings that out is Veronica Cartwright's performance throughout the entire film is incredible. She acts her socks off in every scene. And like, I don't think I've seen many films where people look genuinely scared. But there's something about her performance, like some of the things that she said. You know how, like, at the end of Wicker Man, and Edward Woodward is in the Wicker Man, and he's burning, and he's going, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" And that haunts me, because those last few kind of things he's screaming as he's being burned alive sound very realistic in my, not that I have personal experience of watching anyone burn alive in a Wicker Man, but like it's a realistic kind of portrayal of like fear to me. And Veronica Cartwright does that in this film better than anyone else in the cast. Like, just when, again, when the chestburster scene happens, you can hear in the background, she's going, "Oh, God." And it's like, yeah, that's what you would do. But also in the final, kind of her final stages where she's, well, actually before that, there are many scenes where shit's going down and she's crying because she's scared and she doesn't want to know what to do. She wants to abandon ship. Like, her character wants to abandon ship rather than kind of hunt it down or blow it up or anything. She just wants to get in an escape pod and leave. And then at the end, where she's trapped with Parker or Yaphet Kotto in the kind of, I forget which room it is, and the xenomorph's coming for them, and Yaphet keeps saying, "Get out of the way," and she's like, "I can't," because she's paralyzed with fear. So she just keeps saying the same thing over again, like, "Oh God, I can't." That is so realistic to me. Like, there's no quips, there's no one-liners, there's no girly screaming and clutching, or like, it's just a genuine raw portrayal of fear, and she just acts her fucking socks off on that. And I think the contrast between her and Ripley as well is really fascinating to me. Like, Ripley shows fear towards the end, and more so when she realizes Ash's betrayal, but then that she's the only survivor on the ship and she's fucked. That's when she starts to get really scared. But up until that point, she's quite competent and cold and professional and cool. And she tells everyone to shut up when she's trying to think. And whereas Lambert's character is much more vulnerable and soft. And I love that. I love that performance. I feel like her death was really pitiful. And that's again how a horror movie gets you, I think, is with the realism surrounding how the actors respond to fear. And I guess you could look at something like the Blair Witch Project, where they're dumped in the woods and Heather, I forget her name, snot's coming out of her nose and all the rest of it. I mean, it's pilloried and laughed at and made fun of, but it was a really realistic depiction of fear, I thought. Like, you would. I would be snotting everywhere if it was me. So
you're in the middle of the woods alone. Yeah, everyone, exactly. You don't know exactly what's going on.
Some weird witches leaving gloopy things outside your tent and making twiggy dolls, and it's just, it's the portrayal of, for me, and I guess this is something I think about a lot, because when you're writing horror, you think about how your protagonists or antagonists respond to horrific situations, and it's like, how would I respond to this? I love the comparison to Ripley earlier on, and I love that I'm apparently bringing Ripley energy into the room. I'll take it, but if I was being honest, I'm more of a Lambert, and I would freeze, because I've been in horrible situations before and I have frozen. I'd love to think that I would kick ass, but I would be a snotty mess in the woods in a horrible situation.
I think
that
the truth of
can
that
be
matter
snotty
is,
too.
Yeah, I think the truth of the matter is Ripley's who we would want to be and who we would esteem to be in that situation, and the other characters are a mixture of who we actually would be. Disbelieving whatever else is out there or whatever the situation is, and all the way to completely melting down in fear and succumbing to fear.
But this is so Ripley's character to me is the definition of brave, because there's one scene at the very end. So it's the beautiful jump scare scene, which nobody expected. And even now, even though I know it's coming, it still gets me. And so you have your false respite moment, which is another classic horror thing to do. Is like, you think she's safe. Brilliant. Again, like with The Descent and movies like that, where there's a moment where you think, oh, they've made it out alive. Well done. And she's in the escape pod and she's sitting down at the computer screen to program her coordinates or whatever. And then there's movement in the paneling above her, and the xenomorph's face just uncurls. And so she does this thing where she backs off in fear. I never really understood why it was kind of so comatose in the wall, why it didn't run after her. But I'm guessing there was a reason for that. And she slides into her spacesuit, and she's obviously terrified at this point. So I like to see that, because I thought that the vulnerability was necessary, because she's trapped in an even smaller space. She's the only person alive other than the cat, and the xenomorph's right there. And she puts her spacesuit on, and she starts pressing all the buttons she needs to blast it with gas or whatever. And then there's this moment which is so cleverly written. In order to blast it out of the airlock, or blast it, sorry, I'm not from up north, blast it out of the airlock, she has to turn her back on the alien and cross the room. And it's only a little distance, but she can only do it by turning her back on the xenomorph to get to the airlock button. And there's a scene, it's like a tiny short scene, it's a couple of seconds long, and she's turned her back on it, and she's shitting herself because she can't see it anymore before she gets to the button, and she slams it down. Like, that for me is like the equivalent of when you're a kid and you need a wee, and you get up in the middle of the night and you don't want to look under your bed or in the corner of your room or in any of the shadows. You just need to run to the bathroom and wee and get back into bed. But you're terrified because you don't know what's in the shadows or behind you or under the bed. You just don't know. So your body is like paralyzed with fear. But do you know what I mean? But you still have to do it. And it was so effective and so brave. And it really gets to me, that tiny little moment where she turns her back on it because she has to. Like, can you imagine being in that situation? You wouldn't want to turn your back on that thing because you wouldn't know what it was doing. Even if you had to, I don't think I could. And that's what sets her apart, I think, from the others, in that she's willing to do that, you know, like she's willing to do whatever it takes and override her strong body responses and stuff. Whereas I would probably be on the floor, just sobbing mess while it slowly unfurled itself from the paneling and ate me.
Everyone would be like, why is Gemma imitating James? What's going on here? You know, I was thinking about the two women and how their entire character arcs and the way they're portrayed the entire film leads to these as well. Like, Ripley is always, she's in charge. She's like, you know, she's I'm in charge while you're off the ship. She's laying down the law. She's hitting policy. She's doing all these things she's supposed to do. And she's always like, just kind of like, she's pushed off by the men. But from our point of view, she's constantly reiterated as having the tools and the ability to do these things. And then Lambert, like, when she's chosen to go on the mission, she's like, okay. You know, like, but like she doesn't have that same drive and that same built-in courage and whatever else. And I just think it's great that they went far enough to really push that in the story as well.
Well, I mean, they're just like transport carriers, aren't they? They're drivers, basically, which is, again, why it works better for me than the kind of military thing. Again, as much as I love all of that. And it was the same with Predator. Like, that kind of, I love the military angle. It's great fun, and it is fun, and it's very silly and over the top and machine guns and shit. But like, and it's entertainment for me. That's an action movie. But you don't feel like any of them are genuinely ever really that scared. Like, it's just part of the job, you know? They're used to shooting shit or getting shot or getting killed. Whereas if you're just I guess the space equivalent of a truck driver, unless you're Liam Neeson in that recent movie when he's a truck driver, which I have to say I enjoyed enormously, particularly the more ridiculous it got as the film played out. But I still thought it was a good film. It's different, isn't it? Like, you have a different skill set if you're a navigator or I don't know. It rings true, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I absolutely love how they didn't cookie cutter. Oh, she's female, so she's got to be this way. You know, like there's actual thought put into the characters, and that's something I like in all of this. Like, every character, even if they're basically just asking for money constantly, like, everybody has something, and it affects how they get through the story.
So Yaphet Kotto apparently used to drive Ridley Scott insane because he improvised more than any of the other members of the cast. And he had so many ideas for how to make this scene better or that scene better, and he was so full of energy that there was, again, I'm taking this all from one singular documentary, so I have no idea if it's bullshit or not, but like he used to like wait for Ridley Scott, like, and then pounce on him as soon as he got on set. So Ridley would ask before he went on set, like, which door was he hanging out by, so he could come on a different door. Because he'd have these ideas and he would be like, and apparently even on the day where his character was supposed to die, he was like, I've had an idea. This motherfucker's not going to die. I'm going to live. And like just completely wanted to rewrite it and react it in loads of different ways. But the brilliant scene where he's kind of calling Ripley's authority into question and they're kind of trying to debate what to do. And he's like, I'm just going to go off and kill this thing. And she's trying to like get him to listen. They reshot that scene about 4, 5 or 6 times. And every single time the suspicion was that Ridley Scott was kind of pushing him to do this, but he basically needled and pissed off Sigourney Weaver so much that every time they reshot that take, they got more and more out of her, up until the point where she finally snapped and told him that she was the captain of the ship and that he needed to shut the fuck up and let her finish talking. And I loved the dynamics between them because their dynamics off camera were apparently a bit rocky. And it kind of comes through and it's very believable again. Like these are people in a high tension situation, much like with The Thing, although I think it's done better here. You can all be friends until the shit hits the fan. And then you see who your friends are, right? Like people put friendships to one side when survival is at stake, I think. And I loved how realistic that felt to me. And also how her performance kind of bounces off of his, and you can see him improvising in the scenes. Once you know he's doing it, you can go back and watch it and you can see him improvising a lot of what he's saying, and it's beautiful. Like he was obviously a very talented actor, and I think he knew what he was doing a lot more than Sigourney Weaver did, who was kind of relatively green in terms of film making, not in acting, but this kind of acting she was. And the dynamics are brilliant as a result of that, I think. Also, the scene where Lambert slaps Ripley just after she's tried to sort of deny them entry because they've got a fucking alien and she doesn't want it on the ship. And they put Hurt in the medical room, whatever, and Lambert kind of storms on and walks up to Ripley and slaps her. Ridley Scott kind of, every time she would go and do it, Sigourney Weaver would like duck out of the way because she didn't want to get slapped. So Ridley Scott would tell Lambert, like he got fed up and he took her to one side and he said, just make sure you get her next time. So she sort of, I think she pretended to go one way and then she went another way and she slapped her really, really hard. And Sigourney Weaver burst into tears because it really hurt. And then she was really annoyed with herself because she said that that's not what Ripley would do. And I think she was upset because she didn't feel like it had to go that far to be a realistic take, but that was what Ridley Scott wanted, and it worked. So there's an awful lot when you read about the kind of actual filmmaking experience that mirrors what's going on uncannily in the fictional story, like the interpersonal tensions, the claustrophobia, the issues with management and personalities, and there's the echoes between fact and fiction that are brilliant in this film. It was a lot of it's probably legend and lore, but it really adds to the overall experience.
Well, and the stuff that is real just resonates, and it's going to be another reason that we hold on to this film. Like when you have chemistry that's that real, it will always shine through, and you mix that with the practical effects and the way that things are shot to make it feel extremely claustrophobic and everything else we've talked about. And that's always going to add more rewatch value.
I think the other thing we need to talk about is the use of sound in this movie as well, and repetitive sound. So there are lots of little sound motifs that punctuate parts of this film at various different intervals that make it work so well in terms of adding tension and making it more of a horror story. And so just things like the sound which kind of carries on into the second movie, which is the beeping sound of that they come up with this locating device, which picks up movement in the ship so they can track the alien. The kind of recurring beep of that in certain scenes. There's the score itself. There's moments in the score which stand out more than others, and they tend to be little repetitive moments where there's little kind of bursts of flute, kind of a motif that sort of goes over and over again. And then there's things like when they're using the blowtorch, the flamethrower, sorry, again, which is like another thing comparison. I think that's why this film sticks in my head so much. There's the kind of tick, tick, tick as the flame's going and the gas is feeding the flame. And there's just all sorts. There's like the recurring alarm sound when she's initiated self-destruct and the alarm is going recurrently in the background. Like, sound is used really, really effectively in this film to increase the claustrophobia. It's almost like a claustrophobic sound landscape. Like Ridley Scott understood what sets your teeth on edge and unsettles you, and knew how to manipulate it in terms of all of the senses. It's not just what you see, it's what you hear. And I love that. I think it's so clever.
Yeah, I had my headphones on while I was watching it because I tend to watch things late at night after everybody else is asleep. And like, it really made me hone in on that background noise that you're talking about. Like, I had points where I was like, is something beeping in my house? You know, or like,
yeah. And it's unsettling,
so
right?
Light.
It sets your teeth on edge, though. Like, if I'm kind of a hyper anxious person anyway, so any kind of repetitive sound pisses me off more than it probably would a normal person. But like, once you hear it, you can't stop hearing it, and it just adds a layer of like excruciating tension to things, which I think is so cleverly done. It's so cleverly done. I wish sound was used a lot more in movies than it is sometimes. Because it's like it's another tool in the pack, not beyond the music. The music's really important, but like the sound effects and the sound design, and maybe that's like my kind of, because I've worked with a lot of horror podcasts now and audio dramas and stuff. Maybe I listen to those things a bit more because of that. But I think it adds to the whole package, so it makes an experience complete, and yeah, in terms of adding to tension, and it's clever. I like it a lot.
Well, it's definitely necessary, because if you think about it in terms of you're in the house by yourself. I mean, because I've seen this movie compared to, or at least labeled as a haunted house movie, or at least in that same vein. If you're in a house by yourself or in a spaceship by yourself and you keep hearing these noises, whether it's a click, a beep, some of the things you're going to tune out, but those things that you're not used to hearing, and then, as you said, Jim, if they become repetitive, they're going to stick out to you more. If I'm in my house and it's quiet, or I'm listening to something and there's a sound that happens that is not like anything else that has been taking place, and then I hear it again, it's going to be disturbing to me until I figure out what that noise is.
Yeah.
And once you do, then you get that safety, you get a security back, whereas in this film, you don't get that security and that safety. And the only thing, and while you're talking about the sounds, the only other thing I thought about was there was this ride at Disney World. It was like Alien Encounter. They discontinued it because it was apparently too scary.
Oh, no, I want to go.
But I swear to you, I went on it years ago. They changed it in like the Stitch, from Lilo and Stitch ride. So it's basically the same thing, except all the scary stuff is gone. But it was practically the same thing as Alien, where you're in this spaceship and this being gets loose. And every time I wrote it, I felt like I was in the movie Alien or Aliens, because it makes those same hissing noises. There's this dripping that takes place throughout. It's got these great acoustics and this great use of sound to drive the tension, more than like the air guns and things like that to hit the back of your neck or your feet or whatever. But by having that sound there, it made the ride so much scarier, because you felt as though at any moment that alien was going to come and, bite your head off. And the same thing with this film, where even though I've seen this movie, I forgot how many times I've seen this one and Aliens, but I was sitting there kind of questioning myself, like, is Ripley going to make it? Because of the tension that is driven with all those different things that you mentioned, the sound, the space, the interaction with people, the uncertainty, the mystery of what this thing is. Because as an audience member, you've seen parts of it. As a cast member or a crew member, they haven't seen it until it's too late.
No, I agree. I agree with you completely. It's interesting what you're saying about the comparison to a haunted house as well, because when I was trying to describe the kind of visuals of this, mostly the Geiger visuals, of the kind of not the interior of the Nostromo so much, but the alien ship. And then later on, when you see that the xenomorph has kind of created this incubator in the bottom of Nostromo as well, and he's got Dallas kind of in a cocoon, and Brett as well. We haven't spoken enough about Harry Dean Stanton either and how awesome he is. But there's that scene, and everything's kind of black and icky and fluid, and it's very much the Alien design, and you can tell it's Alien. And I my first thought of the visuals, a way of describing the aesthetics to do with Alien, were haunted Art Nouveau, because that's how it looks to me, like those fluid organic shapes, but fucked, like. And it's interesting. The haunted house thing just reminded me. It's completely not had anything to do with what you actually said, Don. I'm being really rude, but it just reminded me. Yeah.
We always appreciate people who are rude to Don, so you just get bonus points.
Wow.
I can't be rude. I'm British.
Never rude to me.
It's not in my DNA. I can't be rude. Except to Brandon. I have to apologise as well, because the last time I was on, I was really rude to Brandon about how much he wanted to be Tom York. And I felt really mean about it afterwards when I listened to it back. And I was like, I sound horrible. So no wonder he came back on without me.
Yeah, he actually came back on because I was like, dude, I had to skip that episode. I haven't gotten to talk to you. Come back.
No, it's because he wanted to talk about masturbating and mermaids. That's why. I know exactly why he came back on that show. If it's not necks, it's fish lady fetishes, or like, honestly, boys.
Who was talking about penises and lady parts? I don't remember.
But that's not me. That's Geiger. Don't blame the messenger.
I do believe one of us was writing down the number of times there was a mention of phallic symbols or phallic content, and it wasn't me or James.
Okay. I can't remember. I'm denying all knowledge of that.
That's okay. I've got an appointment with Dr. Freud for you on Monday, so.
Oh, thank you. But actually, the creature design as well, another thing, I'm looking at my notes. One of the things that works really well about the xenomorph in terms of promoting fear, it hasn't got any eyes. And I love that. Think of it like, you think of all the scary monsters movies that you see, or ghosties or whatever, and there's always something wrong with their eyes, or like, but this just doesn't have any eyes. Mm-hmm. And the idea being is that, I think Geiger was saying that it's you never really know where it's looking or what it's thinking or anything, because it has no, like, even Predator has eyes. Predator has human eyes, which does kind of detract from the overall like scariness, not of the badassery, because I think Predator is badass and I love it. But like, as soon as you get to that thing where you make eye contact with it, you are a bit like, yeah. But this this alien ain't got no eyes, and that works. Isn't that simple? So simple and effective. I love that.
I never thought about that before, but you're totally right.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, where I hadn't considered it because there's so much focus on all those other parts of the alien's body, whether it's this one or it happens to be the alien queen. There's so much focus on the movement, the speed, just the darkness behind that being, and of course, just how intimidating and imposing of a figure it is.
And it works, right? It works. I think bring back. So interestingly, like the documentary I was watching ended with, again, I've just kind of lumped this group of curmudgeonly men talking as the producers, because there were about 7 of them, and I can't remember their names, so that's terrible of me. But one of the producers, I believe, or execs, was saying that if they were to revisit the franchise, and I think this documentary was probably made in like the early noughties or late 90s or something, he was saying that it would be good to take it back to its kind of original horror roots and turn it and make another kind of thriller in the sky or scary movie in the sky. And I think if you're going to do that, bring back a human performer for the xenomorph. And because I think there is, I forget which of the Alien movies it is. There is another human performer when the alien has a kind of baby with Sigourney Weaver. And there's the weird white version of it. Do you remember? Like the much more human kind of white sticky, and that's got eyes. And Sigourney Weaver has to. I think it must be Alien 3.
Yeah, it's got to be 3 where they were in the prison and.
Yeah, and she sort of develops a slightly maternal relationship with him, and then she has to kill him. And I think that might have been a human performer. From what I can remember, it looked very much like that. But I just think bring back that kind of. Although I don't know where you'd find another 6'10" man with legs quite as long.
you mentioned The Hobbit earlier. Why not get Benedict Cumberbatch to with the CGI dots and everything? Because I'm saying that half
crawling around on the floor.
Yeah, because
the reason I'm chuckling at that is because just going back to Brandon, he's got a nickname for Benedict Cumberbatch, which he told me, which is Bendy Dick Cumbersnatch. It just makes me laugh so much every time I hear his name. I just hear Bendy Dick now. I can't think of anything else. I'm sorry. Oh, you'll probably cut this out.
Nope, I'm gonna leave it.
No, it's saying it.
Oh.
I've learned with you two, I have to leave evidence for later, but no.
Sorry. I'm so sorry, Don. I keep interrupting you and completely bringing down the level of class.
No, you add.
He's used to that. He's used to that. That's all I do.
If there's one person to interrupt me, it's you, Gemma, not James.
Okay. All right. Special privileges.
No, but I mean, I think they would have to probably split the difference now. I would prefer, because again, just I guess to make this 3 for 3 or 3 votes to none and make it unanimous. I am a lover of the practical effects and the way that you can get someone in a costume to portray the alien, the villain, the monster, whatever it is. I liked the most recent versions of Alien where it was Prometheus and Alien Covenant. But I think especially with Alien Covenant, because you get the xenomorph in that film, the mistake that they make is trying to show the xenomorph almost like a having superpowers for some reason. Like because I'm not sure exactly if it's male or female at that point, but the xenomorph is like hanging on to a spaceship as it's trying to take off, and he isn't impacted by gravity as much as the humans are, who have to magnetize their boots. And it would have been great just to see glimpses of that, where you get the head movement, you see that face through the glass, or you see the claws, or you see the tail whipping around. I didn't need to see the whole xenomorph on top of the ship or trying to get into the ship to get that feeling. But it took all the horror elements away, because now it's, oh my gosh, this thing is on the ship and we've got to get away from it.
Aliens is a like hard fried action movie. It's not horror in any way, shape or form, is it? And none of the following ones are really either. Like Alien 3 is a prison colony drama. Right. What's the one with Winona Ryder called? Resurrection? I can't remember.
Yeah, and then Resurrection.
I mean,
it's it almost becomes like a kung fu movie.
It's sort of mixed with Guardians of the Galaxy with a little bit of Ron Perlman thrown in. Like it's that kind of space pirate vibe. They're all very different, and that's fine. That's what franchises are. Right. But I am there's the eternal debate, which is better. My husband prefers Aliens, and I'm stickler for Alien because I just don't think it gets better than that. Like it's scary, and that's the vision that also Ridley Scott had for the movie. Is he wanted to make, like you said, he wanted to make a horror movie in space, and it's just the computer thing again. Like it's an interesting debate, isn't it? Because the more I've listened to what I said about not liking computer graphics, the more I'm thinking of things like The Lord of the Rings, where it's actually used to massive amounts of brilliant effect with Andy Serkis in a kind of bodysuit portraying Gollum, and he's completely animated, but it works so well because it's based on human movements and stuff like that. But there's something about, I don't know.
Well, but even then, there are parts of it where, I mean, looking back, I mean, because the movie is still phenomenal. I shouldn't say was phenomenal. is still phenomenal, but there are parts where you can look at some of the CGI and go like, oh.
Well,
Yeah,
mostly
this
the
kind of
bits with
aged a little
Orlando
bit.
Bloom kind of sliding down
Right.
clumps and skating on shields and things, silly things like that. But you don't mind those bits so much. Where it went wrong was with The Hobbit, when it just let's not, let's not. But it's again. So Ridley Scott was also citing like two of his major influences aside from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which he was apparently obsessed with, was Star Wars and what's the space movies? 2022, the Space Odyssey. Is that right? Or 2021? Have I got it wrong?
2001. 2001.
Yeah, something like that. I'm a terrible film nerd. And again, I mean, the original Star Wars, the practical effects in that were phenomenal. We won't talk about the remastered versions because they still hurt me. But I think that's what The Mandalorian gets so right, is that kind of return to lovely, real, practical effects and makeup and puppets and people in costumes. And there's something about it that I think our brains really like and respond to. I think our brains can still tell when something's been made on a computer. Unless it's Jurassic Park, which I knew. But I didn't, it was so good that I was just blown away. But I think our brains can tell.
Like Don said, those were real dinosaurs. And since then, we have elected them all to Congress. So
okay. Well, that was the thing that kind of really struck me when I was watching the making of this was, I said earlier that there's this, I can't remember whether they were producers or executives or whatever, but there's this body of kind of men of a certain age and skin color who all sat around, and they're very skilled and very knowledgeable, and they all made a cracking movie. But it really struck me that Hollywood, certainly back in those days, was a machine comprised mostly of people who all looked very similar. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So to produce a movie where it was that influential, where people were queuing around the block for days to get in, where people ran from the cinema screaming and threw up in the toilets, and some of the cinemas had to cut out the chestburster scene because it ruined their bathrooms at the cinema and they couldn't deal with cleaning it up anymore, so they just chopped that bit from the movie. And the main protagonist is female. I think that's something. I like that a lot, because you think about the time that it was made in, you think about Jaws, you think about all the other major horror franchises, and yeah, what we got was a kick-ass, strong female survivor. And there weren't many of those in that period of time. Not that I can immediately think of, although I would probably be corrected by some well-meaning dude on the internet as soon as this releases.
Well, actually.
That was a pretty good American accent you just did, Gemma.
Yeah.
Oh, good, because Brandon always takes the piss, although his English accent's terrible, so he can fuck off. I'm just looking at my other notes. Apparently, Sigourney Weaver was allergic to the cat at one point, which made it really difficult to be affectionate to Jonesy. And she was so terrified that they would replace her rather than replace the cat. That gives you an indication of where she was at that point in her filmmaking journey. Like, she thought she was the replaceable one because she was allergic to the cat, not the other way around. It turns out that most of the crew, because it was supposed to be hot and sweaty, spent all day being covered in glycerin. And there was something about the glycerin that combined with the cat hair that brought her out in a rash. But she genuinely thought that they would replace her instead of the cat. So
they could have just added her going, I'm allergic to cats. Why do we have this thing on this spaceship? And then that would have made it even more amazing that she still went to save it.
Could have done. There was another anecdote. I don't know why I'm saying all this, because you might as well just go and watch the documentary. Where
this all time. No.
Where they were screening the movie and somebody in the audience was like, just leave the fucking cat behind.
That was the discussion that was going on in my house.
Yeah, but I guess if you're the last living thing on a spaceship for thousands upon thousands of light years all around, you're going to want a companion of some sort. Like, she liked cats. She just didn't want to be alone, maybe. I don't know. There's something very human about that, isn't there? If you see an animal in distress and it's quite vulnerable and stuff. But there is a point where she does drop the cat and then run away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just thought there's so many charming anecdotes from this film. I love it. It's what it's made me realize is how much I want to get into making movies, and I always have done. But every time I see a film that I love like this, and then I watch all the director's cuts or the special features, and back in the days of DVDs when they all had bonus features and stuff, I always just that magic of filmmaking comes through to me, even though I know it was very arduous and very stressful and not very magic at all for many of them for many months. Like, the end result is just magic and like inspires people for so many years. Like, this is a huge inspiration for me. I haven't written a full Alien story yet, but I definitely want to. It's definitely brewing, but it's hard to do something that isn't directly derivative of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just waiting for the right idea to come along. But it's massively influenced me and hugely influenced my love of horror as well.
Well, I would just say it's just going to be an homage. So don't worry about it being derivative.
I'm British. We say homage, innit?
I was waiting for it.
It's a homage. It's not cheese. It's not fromage. I'm going to put some homage on me toast. She's gone, ladies and gentlemen. She's gone.
I do have one question, though. Like, how did this cat survive stasis? Because the cat doesn't have its own little thing, and being in with a human, like, the computer wouldn't know how to regulate both in the same pod. I have questions about this cat, and I think maybe he's an alien as well.
But a cute furry one that doesn't kill anyone or eat them or lay its eggs in their chest or
I would still watch that
on its face. Although cats do like sitting on your face, I've heard. So maybe you're onto something. Don't know.
Yeah, I found that out in the past 2 months of having a cat.
This is why I don't have one. Imagine nothing worse than waking up in the middle of the night with a cat's bum on your face.
Yeah, apparently I'm his favorite, so now that's what happens. But I did find it interesting, and I thought this was kind of a cool touch in the film, that even though Jones, or Jonesy, the cat, has an interaction with the xenomorph, right? There's never a moment where the xenomorph goes after it.
No, it's funny, isn't it? Like, I was wondering about that, because there's this whole cats are superstitious, aren't they? Lots of movies, like The Mummy is scared of cats because of the Egypt link, and cats have got this kind of supernatural thing about them, this aura, haven't they? Or maybe it didn't consider it, like, on a real practical level, it just didn't consider it a viable host. Like, it wasn't big enough, or
possible. But was the xenomorph using any of those other people as a host at that moment? Because it seems like it was just going and killing them for just being present.
No, because it had Brett and Dallas down in the yeah, and its egg size. So it's clear its main directive is to survive and breed and lay eggs and to replicate, isn't it? That's what it does, and that's how it wipes out entire other species and planets. And you see that with the like expanded mythology with Prometheus and things like that. It breeds out other races, doesn't it?
Well, so then you question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, as I say, I think its prime directive is to just breed.
Well, then that makes me question the I guess the corporate need or desire for this to become a weapon, because how are you going to harness whatever you think you can harness from it? I mean, you're saying that this, at least from Ash's responses to Ripley, that this is the perfect specimen, and that this is going to be used as a weapon, or this is going to be turned into a weapon. Like, how are you going to be able to do any of that?
I think it's a DNA thing, isn't it? I think they just wanted DNA or samples or for gene splicing, or, I mean, we're in a society that's got androids.
True.
So probably genetic exploration and stuff isn't that much of a. But this is again another thing about a good horror movie. They don't explain everything, and I think that's how it should be. Like, you don't always need every mystery explained. You've got to leave something for your brain to go away and think about and chew over, and like what will happen to Ripley when she gets out of stasis, and where did the cat come from, and what experience did Ash have before he was implanted on the ship? Did they know him before he was added to the crew, or did somebody, do you know what I mean? Did somebody get to him and reprogram him, or like all these things you just don't know.
Right.
I love that. Even down to like things like Brett and Parker like asking for a bigger share of the profits. Like, there's obviously a backstory there, and they've been screwed out of profits before, or silly little things. Like, not everything is explained, and I like that a lot. I think the ambiguity is, again, it's very good at getting your brain to sort of run away with itself a bit.
Well, and I don't feel like the ship was sent out there specifically for this alien type. So it's not like they were trying to harness that as a military thing so much as anything they found like this.
Like if alien
you
life
encounter
forms,
something,
isn't it?
Yeah. If you encounter an alien life form, your primary mission becomes bring it back. So I don't think it's so much looking at a species that just likes to procreate, humans, but also like... but also just it just happened to be them.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also, I think there was a bit of a fascination with kind of bioweaponry and stuff back in the 70s, wasn't there? And again, that you see that a lot with body horror, and Cronenberg's kind of remake of The Fly is a really good example of like experimentation on the human form. And it was a bit of a preoccupation, I think, in the 70s and 80s. So maybe there were some designs on bioengineering, or I don't know. Again, it's so open to interpretation. I love that. And this is where fan fiction comes in as well, isn't it? Like, go to the
that
fan
can be
forums.
dangerous, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I don't dabble in any of that shit. I like the purity of the movie, and I make up my own theories and just enjoy those without going onto Reddit or whatever. But that's what a good film will do. It will create its own mythology around it. I'd love to write something like that. Imagine writing the screenplay for Alien. Like, how cool is that? I wrote Alien. Oh, all right. It must be awesome.
So you can live off of that for the rest of your life.
Financially.
Well, that too.
Oh, shit.
If they do right by you, yes.
Well, yeah. Or, I mean, I guess the clout leads to other jobs as well.
True.
I wish I knew enough about Hollywood and how it worked. I need to keep learning.
I mean, I would like it solely so that Ripley would be not written by a man, so that we wouldn't get this scene for no fucking reason where she's in her underwear.
Scene. My daughter, she's 7, and I made fun of the scene because my wife, my daughter, and I were watching the movie together because I want her to have a healthy understanding of classic horror films, or at least films that have a significant following. And so we're watching, and her two problems were leaving the cat behind, because that was the only part that she got angry about. The alien showing up didn't bother her so much. She was kind of like, ugh, okay, oh, that thing is gross. The typical things that a 7-year-old would say. And then when the cat gets left behind, she gets angry. She's like, why are you leaving the cat behind? The alien's going to get it. And then when he got to the shuttle part, she looked at both me and her mom, and they were like, why is she taking all of her clothes off? And my wife answered in a practical way. She said, she's been through a lot. She needs to relax, because she made that joke about how, when you get home, you take your bra off, you take your pants off, and you just relax. Like, you'll just sit there in a shirt. And so my daughter kind of understood that from that sense of, when you come home, you take off your pants, you change your clothes, you do these things. But as far as James is pointing out, that's a completely unnecessary scene, because
see, I didn't read it like that at all. I thought that she's changing out of her kegs to get into her stasis suit, and that she needed to, like, because when they wake up at the beginning, they're all in their underwear, aren't they?
They are, but I
well,
mean,
sort of. They have like masking tape for a bra instead of like,
Yeah, but they have like they're going into long-term sleep.
6 feet of fabric that the men got, but
but I mean, as far as the
felt
drawn
like
out
she
way
was
of it.
I don't know. I thought like I didn't feel like it was gratuitous, and I tell you for why, she says in her best Yorkshire, even though she's not from there.
You don't know what that means.
No, I know you don't. I know. I've just realised Yorkshire.
Hey,
so I'm
our listeners there too, so it's fine. Continue.
Hello, Yorkshire, and I'm sorry. I thought it added to a level of vulnerability to her that you hadn't seen yet. On the one hand, okay, possibly a little bit gratuitous, but she's only in it. She's in her like bra and nicks for maybe like a minute or two, and there is a purpose to it. She's getting undressed so that she can get into the chamber, the sleep chamber.
Right.
And then the xenomorph happens to be there. She's been quite practical about it. Okay, she has got the tiniest pair of pants I've ever seen in my life, but then she is also like 7 feet tall and really slim, so she can get away with it. And she's kind of been quite practical about it. She's like taking off her necklace and stuff, and she's programming things as she's doing around. And I don't know about you, but I don't know about the ladies in your house, but like I quite often walk around in my bra and nicks and do other things at the same time because you do. If I'm getting ready for bed, I'm like getting out of my day clothes and I'm getting into the next set of clothes, but I've got a load of stuff I'm doing in between, like cleaning my teeth or undoing the dishwasher or whatever. And I'm quite often, it felt quite natural to me that she would do that. And then there's only a few minutes that she's actually exposed like that before she gets into a spacesuit anyway. And then the next scene you see her and she's in the sleep chamber, and I think she's wearing like a light suit or something. So I see what you're saying, but like I think in this film I didn't feel like it was gratuitous, and isn't that interesting? I'm like the only woman.
No, and I
like,
agree with all of that. My sole issue with it is that I don't feel that if Ripley was a guy, we would have this scene. And so that's what I have an issue with. I don't think that we would see whoever would be there instead running around in his boxers to get stuff done, because we just we don't make films like that. We do it in a way of this.
Let's be real. Like you guys basically just hang around naked a lot in your houses, don't you? Like scratch your balls, kind of.
I'm naked right now.
Like, exactly. They're not going to do a realistic portrayal of a dude just sat there scratching his nuts.
Oh, Gemma, you're
picking his
bringing out one of my
toenails.
favorite movies, which is just one of the guys where the brother and the sister are discussing how she is going to portray men, and the brother says, "Well, you got to scratch your balls," and she says, "Why? You just got to scratch the balls. It's the thing that guys do." She's like, "Why?" He's like, what if my balls don't itch? He's like, they're balls. They always itch. Like,
and even if you're not scratching them, you're kind of just like playing with them or rearranging them or like making shapes out of them. It's just like, can you imagine that would like really detract from the magic at the end of this film if it was just a dude like manipulating himself in a completely natural fashion?
As everything blows up and the shuttle's leaving, he's just touching himself, It's like, yeah, I did that. Amazing.
Oh, I have got a point.
I think if it had been a guy, to support James's point, if it had been a guy, it wouldn't have been in that wide shot. It would have been a close up of, you understand that he's taken off his shirt, probably might even just strip down to into the nude. But it's not going to be panned out.
The reason that wide shot is there, I don't think that's got anything. I actually think maybe the bra and knickers is a distraction thing, because the xenomorph is there the entire time in the background. And that's the whole reason it's a wide shot. It's because it's there the whole time, and you only see it when she's then close up, and then it starts to move. So like it's a deliberately misleading wide shot, and I don't think it's so much about showing her lovely gazelle-like form in a pair of tiny knicks, and more about the fact that you're not seeing what's right in front of you, and it's clever, and I think it's really clever. And maybe that's why she's in her underwear as well, to distract the eye a bit, and it's very effective because she's gorgeous. Mm-hmm. But the fucking alien's like right there behind her the whole time in the wall. So
and it does distract you as an audience member, because if you're watching it, your first thing is like, oh my God, she's getting naked. and you're not necessarily thinking of it from an artistic standpoint or a storytelling standpoint, you're going to be drawn in and then distracted from whatever else is taking place. I mean, there could have been a fire on the ship. There could have been, any number of things that had been taking place inside or outside that ship that would have been drawn away because of your attention on her.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be really disappointed if it turns out that some grubby studio executive went, yeah, stick her in her underwear. Go on. Just for the audience. And then that was like, I've actually been completely proved wrong. But I'm sticking to my theory.
No, I love your theory.
It's probably the same guy who kind of like George Lucas when he told Carrie Fisher, like, you don't wear a bra in space. It's actually going to suffocate you. Don't wear a bra. And so,
I think you need one for anti-gravity reasons. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see, depending on how big they were. This has gone so absurd now. I'm so sorry.
Well, I don't think that we can beat that conversation, so we might as well wrap that up and move into movie recommendations. So this is the part where you get to tell people what they should watch if they enjoyed this. Gemma, you can go first.
Well, I think, I did this in the kind of beginning as well, but for me, companion pieces to this film are going to be The Thing, The Blob, whether it's the kind of 50s Steve McQueen or the 80s one is also very good. Mm-hmm. Cronenberg's The Fly, Event Horizon, definitely. I would also put in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because Ridley Scott was so heavily influenced by it. And there is one more film that is escaping me that I can't think of. And Predator, of course. If you want another kind of take on an alien, but in a different manner, there's Alien on Earth. And obviously that's why the franchises later kind of crossed over and stuff.
Awesome. All right, so this is where I usually do my double feature thing. Obviously, I think The Thing is probably the best choice for a double feature with this. So I'm going to throw out another one just because I love pushing this movie anytime I can. But if we're going to talk super small cast, space, horror, and just a great overall isolated feeling, I got to go with Moon because I adore Moon and I just keep trying to push it to everybody. All right, Don, it's all you.
All right.
And your 87.5 choices.
There goes half my list, so I'm down to 40. So I would just say I would start off with anything. If you like this, definitely follow up with the Alien series, Aliens, and then Prometheus and Covenant. I'm not too big on 3 and Resurrection. But as far as other films, I had Predator, but Gemma took it from me. Total Recall, I would include in that one, just for the space issues and all the stuff that's going on there. Cloverfield Paradox is another good one. Color Out of Space, which we covered on a previous episode. Battle Los Angeles, if you're looking more for an action kick with aliens. Where they do a great job through a good bit of that movie of not showing you what the aliens look like. Same thing with War of the Worlds. If you're looking for claustrophobia, I would say a very good movie for that is Buried with Ryan Reynolds. He spends the entire movie buried underground. We've mentioned Jaws on the show, so I would say that one as well. Apollo 13, Signs. James mentioned They Live on the show, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and last but not least, because this movie probably has the most iconic chest-bursting scene, only second to Alien, Spaceballs.
Yes!
A movie I got in trouble for in 1988 because I bought it on a pay-per-view in a hotel.
It was $400.
My dad definitely acted like it was.
That's cracking. That's Rick Moranis, isn't it? That's
yes.
Very, very
Lord
funny
Helmet.
film. That's just made me want to go away and watch Robin Hood Men in Tights now, which is also very, very silly. And
I just rewatched it last month, and it totally. When I say it held up, I mean it's the same as it was. I don't mean that it's It's one of my favorite movies, but that doesn't make it great, right? But I totally loved it all over again. It was amazing. Do it.
Some of it's a bit like, oh, I don't think you can say that anymore. But
definitely, yeah.
But yeah, it's still it's supremely silly. Silly is very good.
Very cool.
So maybe watch that after Alien if you've tensed yourself out so much you need to like release some energy.
That is the most unexpected double feature that we've ever done. All right, let's bring it back to you. You want to tell our listeners where they can find you on social media, how to order the new book, and how to help you raise some funds for the short film?
Sure. I mean, the easiest thing to do is just to type my name. It's Gemma with a G and Amor, like the love. Stick me onto Google. I am quite prolific on the internet, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and now TikTok, shockingly, all under my name or the handle Many Little Words. And there's details about all the things I'm involved with on my social profiles because there's an awful lot of stuff going on. So I think that's the easiest thing to do is just Google me.
Fantastic. All right. So I suppose that wraps it up for another week. So thank you for coming back. And we definitely look forward to the next time you're here.
Hurrah. Me too.
Because I just make assumptions that you'll be back, you know.
Well, yeah.
All right. So until next time, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will be back next week here at thenecronama.com.
Maybe in our underwear.